Hi there. So I'm going to walk you through a very simple example of how you can start incorporating concepts like incrementality and marginal returns, not in the very strict, scientific definition sense of the term, but in a more holistic sense of the term. How much a particular ad spend from a particular channel is giving you marginal returns. So here in front of you, you see some data points for different dates, and this is the spends, and this is the total spends. This are the targets, and you will see the targets are the same for every day, and then you have the percentage of the target. So that's simply what percentage is this particular the actual the achieved value above the target, and above or below the target. The same goes for the contribution margin. So whether or not it's above or below the target, again, which is the same for every day. So we have these two columns here, percentage of target, and we also have another couple of columns you'll see, which is the 3-day moving average. Now 3-day moving average, I've talked about moving averages in my previous videos. You might want to take a look at those, or from anywhere else. Very simple concept. You'll see that it starts from this here, and these couple of cells are empty, and there's a reason why, because this one here 20.50 is essentially an average of these 3 dates here. I'm just selecting them. The next one, 22.37, is the average of the 3 except the first one, so it starts from the second one. So every time you're basically taking it's getting offset by one cell. So that's pretty much, or one row. That's pretty much the basic concept of a simple moving average. Moving average, by the way, can be of different types. There are other types of moving averages. This is the simple moving average. Why are we taking it? Because we are trying to smooth the fluctuations which are going to take place, the noise at the daily level. So we want to smooth that out, and this is very important for performance marketers, because they then can use this information to inform their decisions. So very important from a strategic point of view, because if you're looking at only daily data, you're probably just looking at also a bit of noise, quite a bit of noise, which is very difficult to account for, and which can potentially lead you to take wrong decisions or not so useful decisions. So a better idea is to look at an average, but an average which also sort of gives you a proper aggregate. And I think that's why the arithmetic mean is not as good as the 3-day moving average, which is a better alternative. Again, the more sophisticated the way of averaging, the better it is, but then there's also a cost benefit ratio, right? So by cost I also mean the time and effort. So 3-day moving average, as I just showed you, it's so simple to calculate, right? Anyone can do that just by using that simple inbuilt formula as well from Google Sheet, or if it's Excel in a very similar way. But if it's a more complicated version of moving average, or any other advanced version of averages or mean, then of course you need a little bit more complicated formula, or maybe even some data science concepts. But why do that when at least at some level you can still get started with it? And you need to take decisions quickly, and you need to take decisions based on scientific methods as well. So this is the optimal, I was thinking, this is the optimal point. So once you have the moving day averages, and these moving day averages, by the way, is of the percentage of difference between the actual and target, and this I'm taking for both the total spend and the contribution margin. Now comes the question of how to actually factor in the concept of incrementality or marginal returns. So this is where I'll be using the moving averages and a ratio of the moving average for the for the spend and the contribution margin. And remember what I just said, the moving average is nothing but a moving average of the difference between the actuals and the predicted or the target. So there are two 3-day moving averages, or rather there are two incremental factors here, two columns. One is for a 1 day, so this is basically based directly of the percentage of target, which is where I'm taking a simple ratio. So this 426% is simply nothing but it's saying that, hey, 158.87% is actually around 4.26 times 37.3%. So that's the simple idea, like how much percentage of contribution margin gain have we got for the certain percentage gain or decrease in total spend, right? So this ratio is actually a marginal return in a sense, right? Instead of just taking directly the ratio of contribution margin and the spend, we are taking a ratio of the changes. So that gives, because ultimately incrementality is all about changes. Like for every additional dollar spent what is the additional margin, contribution margin that's been added. And everybody's talking about that, and totally makes sense, and hope this also makes sense. So now that you have for one day, you'll see that in this column there is a bit of a conditional formatting that's been done. So if it is above 100%, think of it, we are taking a ratio between contribution margin gain over spend. Again, this can be any metric, by the way. This does not just have to be contribution margin. This could have been revenue or any other similar sort of outcome metric that you're interested in. So if it's above 100%, 100% is kind of like break even. By break even, I don't mean that necessarily the break even again in the normal sense of the term, but in the sense of incrementality. Like, it's not really giving you any additional benefit really as much, as long as it's 100%. If it's below 100%, which in these two cases below 0%, so that's actually worse. But if it's below 100%, it means that okay, so there was a gain, but it was not as much as the spend rose, so the incrementality wasn't really there, right? So so that's like between 0 to 100%. Anything above 100% is actually your incrementality, and 426% is great, 710% is even greater, so on and so forth. So green is 218%. I just obviously these will be in green as well, all the top three and the bottom one. I've just shown these few results here just for comparison. This is the 1 day version, and if you look at the 3 day moving version now, you get an even better picture. So it obviously starts from here, where you're taking the average of 116 and 28.5 as opposed to 158 and 37 there, and you'll see that it's, so suppose if you were to take a decision as a performance marketer, say minus 34%, if you're looking at only this day's data, obviously I don't think anyone really does that, but if you sort of get fixated on that and you're only looking at that day's data, for instance, you might just be misled, like, okay, incrementality factor was bad for this particular day. But if you look at a 3 day moving average, on the other hand, you already don't have to like manually look at the data and try to make a visual sense. I've seen a lot of people try to do that, try to do some mental calculation. Why even do that when you can just have another column here? So 273%, it means that you actually have nearly 3 times or 2.7 times better improvements in contribution margin as opposed to the increase in spend. So that's a definite net positive. And so 273% incremental factor here. For this particular date, it's actually 37%. So there's not been a loss in that sense, but in the sense that with respect to how much you have increased the spend for that day. So for instance, if you go back to this day, you'll see that there's a 45% rise in the spend compared to the target. There you go. Compared to that, there's actually been over the last 3 days, this is a moving average, remember, this actually over the last 3 days we actually had a 37% incremental factor only, right? So that's an interesting thing. And every day, if you're looking at the moving day average, it's a rolling average. There's also a reason why it's called that. You are constantly taking into account the last 3 days from that day backwards. So that gives you a very recent, and yet not just a daily, but also sort of a aggregated over a recent few days data point. So that's a good way to decide, and you can then decide, okay, what kind of campaigns do I need to optimize? Do I raise the budgets? Do I decrease the budgets? These are the kind of decisions you can take better if you take a 3 day moving average. So 64%, again, not probably a green signal. Like if you were only looking at 1 day, you'll probably get, say, 218%. Let's go ahead and increase our best performing campaigns, blah blah blah. But in general, you're still at 64%, which is less than 100%. So your recent increase in spend hasn't been incremental in the last 3 days. So take caution. Now I've also done a visualization here. So a quick visualization can actually make things even easier. All this calculation becomes easier. The only thing is that this is not, as far as I've seen, not super easy to plot. It doesn't automatically happen. So the way this has been done, if you look at it carefully, is that the 0 here actually corresponds to 100. So it lies between minus 250 and 200. And if I just click on it here, you'll see that this first one, it corresponds to the 1 day incremental factor column. And you'll see that these numbers here, these are actually adjusted values. So I'll actually show this one. This is probably just a screenshot, and it's happening in the next sheet. So if I just click on this one here, so you'll see that this is minus 63%, right? And this is minus 36%. but none of that is here, and that's because it's being adjusted with respect to 100, right? So it's the 0 here actually stands for it's basically your 100 here, the deviation from the 100%. So do not mind the column values here, but your 0 here actually means the 100, and that's precisely why you have minus 63.4 here for 37%, because it's being calculated with respect to 100%. So I hope that makes sense. And for each of these you'll see that if I hover over here is 307%, which is actually adjusted with respect to 100%. So it's 307 above 100, and this one is minus 63 means 63.4 below 100. So that's how this has been calculated, and this is a much more visually intuitive way, because instead of looking at 0, because like I said, 0 to 100 doesn't really mean anything very progressively beneficial. It's not enough for you to take a decision, because it's not yet in the negative zone, and yet it's not even very prominently incremental, because it has to be above 100% in order for that to happen. So yeah, tables, visualization, whichever is your thing. I'm a very visual guy, so I for instance prefer it this way. So the choice is yours entirely. But yeah, like I said, this is probably not very easy to generate. You probably have to use something like an app script or something. So I just use this little app script here to sort of generate these graphs, which is just sort of getting the data from the second sheet here and generating it. But whichever way you want it, if you want help with this, do let me know. By the way, I can share this script, or I can share this sheet, whichever way is going to be useful to you. So hope this was overall useful, and my idea was not to talk about incrementality or marginality in a very broad, very strictly scientific sense of the term, but in a broad sense of the term in which marketers often use them. I know the risks involved, that's why I've constantly reiterated this point, but this can be very useful for quick decision making, while also not completely overlooking the importance of scientific method. The whole objective is for you to optimize better with better insights. So yeah, do let me know if this was useful. If you want similar such videos or similar such insights, or any help at all, or if you have any questions, comments, do leave them below. I'll be more than happy to read them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.